Hello there, my faithful ones. I'm Edwin the Jesús, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you about the 7 dispensations, rather a quick summary and recap of what these 7 dispensations of the Bible are. Now, before I tell you all of them, let me explain what a dispensation is. A dispensation is the set period of time during which man is tested as to his obedience to some specific revelation of the will of God. To put it in more simple terms, it is a point of time in which God deals with his people and the world as a whole in a particular way. Now, with that said, let me tell you what these 7 dispensations are by name. The first is innocence, the second, conscience, the third, human government, the fourth, promise, the fifth, law, the sixth, grace, and the seventh, the Millennium Kingdom. Each dispensation contains a new revelation and new conditions man is to live up to through belief and obedience. Each dispensation ends with man's failure and God's judgment. Let's begin with the first dispensation, called Innocence. The dispensation of innocence begins at the beginning of man, when God created Adam from the dirt of the ground, and it ended when both Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit and sinned. Their expulsion from the Garden of Eden was the ending of that dispensation, and their judgment was to be expelled from the garden. Then this leads to the second dispensation, which is called conscience. After the fall of man, the dispensation of conscience lasted from the fall all the way to the flood. Conscience is knowledge of good and evil, and men were tested to see what choice they will make with their conscience. At the beginning, there were mainly 2 groups, those who lived for God and those who didn't. Eventually, the earth became corrupted, and men were so evil and so sinful, God needed to send the flood, and that was his judgment at the age of conscience. Next, the third dispensation, called human government, takes place from after the flood all the way to the confusion of language at the Tower of Babel. A great commandment after the flood was for man to separate and replenish the earth. However, mankind did not separate. This led way to Noah's grandson, a man named Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter against God. He founded the kingdom of Babylon, and under his evil rule, he got all of humanity to build the Tower of Babel, so they could make a name for themselves and be prepared in case another flood happened. God was displeased by man's defiance and therefore confused man's language so that the people could not understand one another. This caused them to splinter off into groups, and that was the ending of that dispensation, with the judgment and separation of mankind through different languages. After this came the fourth dispensation, which was called promise. It begins when a man named Abraham, who God made a promise to, God promised Abraham to make him a great name and nation for God's chosen people. Abraham's descendants became the Hebrews, or the Jewish people. This dispensation starts with Abraham, then continues with his son Isaac and his grandson called Jacob, or Israel. Eventually, due to a famine, the Hebrew people moved to Egypt, away from the promised land that God gave them, and they remained there. Because they did this, the Pharaoh viewed them as a threat, and this dispensation ends with the Hebrew people in slavery under Egyptian rule. After this came the fifth dispensation, which is the Dispensation of Law. It begins in the book of Exodus, where God, through his prophet Moses, frees the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt. Eventually, they make their way to Mount Sinai. Moses receives the 10 Commandments from God, which serves to govern and guide the people. This dispensation carries on through the rest of the Old Testament all the way to the New Testament, and it ends with judgment, as all dispensations do. The judgment, however, instead of affecting all of humanity, it only affected one man. Jesus Christ took the punishment for man's failure to uphold the law, and his death marked the end of this dispensation of law. After this came the 6th dispensation, which is called grace. It begins from the day of Pentecost after Jesus returns to heaven and the Holy Spirit is poured out to the disciples at Jerusalem. This also marks the beginning of the church age. Interesting fact, this is the current dispensation that we are still currently in. However, it's coming to an end soon. Since we are living in the end times, Christ is going to return soon in the clouds to gather up the church. This event is called the rapture, and the church will be spared the judgment that is to come upon the earth. Those left behind will endure the great tribulation that shall last for 7 years, where the Antichrist and his government shall have authority over the earth, and establish a tyrannical dictatorship the likes in which the world has never seen before. Finally, we come to the 7th dispensation that is to come in the future, which is called the Millennium Kingdom. After the Great Tribulation, Christ will return and defeat the forces of the Antichrist and his followers. After overthrowing the Antichrist and his false prophet, they are casted into the lake of fire, and Jesus will also bound Satan and cast him into the bottomless pit. Christ will then rule the earth for 1,000 years. At the end of those 1,000 years, however, Satan will be set free for a short time and attempt one final rebellion. He, however, will be defeated for the final time and be casted into the lake of fire. This dispensation ends with all of humanity being judged in the final judgment called the Great White Throne Judgment. After this, Earth is recreated, reinvented, or the proper word, remade by fire. And then there is a new earth and new heaven as well. Jesus and his people shall forever live in peace in the New Jerusalem. And that will be the ending of the Millennium Kingdom, the 7th and final dispensation. After that comes the eternal state, in which Christ and his people shall live in the New Jerusalem forever. And that's about it, guys. Like I said, this was a quick summary of what the 7 dispensations of the Bible are. If you would like a further in-depth analysis of each dispensation and all the events, maybe I might make videos and you can let me know. But for now, I just wanted to bring to light what these are. And so now you know what each dispensation is. So thank you for watching this video. If you've learned something, please like, comment, subscribe. Please help support the Edwin de Jesús channel, and God bless you all.